Today, I always love talking about Swami. So, this is. While you're up, I left a small bottle of water in the kitchen.
Sure.
Thank you. So, 1988 or 89, I was coming to the Sai Center with Gary, and so it's just been an incredible ride. What a journey so far. So that's been. What's that, 25 years, more or less. I was asking Swami, what do you want me to talk about? And so almost all my experiences have been going through my head, and, thank you very much. And so he said, Russia. I said, start with Russia, because he was so, we had such a wonderful time in Sairona. We had such a wonderful time in 1993. I had moved from San Francisco and was living in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and several of us from Santa Fe went to the Southwestern Conference in Phoenix. Phoenix hosted us that year, and Dr. Goldstein was there, and he was telling us that Swami wanted the Russians to start coming, because they'd only come in ones and twos up until 1993. So Dr. Goldstein asked for volunteers from the American group, for any of us that wanted to fly over to Moscow and speak at their center with the translator and accompany the first organized group of devotees from Russia. So up on my hand, because I automatically knew that Swami was going to give us plenty of interviews.
Вы говорите по-русски?
Say again?
Know any Russian?
No, yet.
It's called spiritual greed.
I guess it is. Yes, that's a good term. It's true.
Lots of interviews.
I am guilty as charged. So happily guilty as charged. So let's see. It was in when was that? I don't remember the time of the year that we had the conference, but we left for Moscow in June, late in June. And this was just so extraordinary to go and be with a group of extraordinarily loving people. I thought we were all loving, but I really got my eyes open as to what always loving, kind people are. 23 Russians from St. Petersburg and Moscow, and a couple more from, I think, the Ukraine joined us. And there were 5 or 6 of us that went from the U.S. There was, some of you know Connie Dillon from Santa Fe, Dixie Cooper from Phoenix, and Baba from Phoenix, and I think there were 6 of us that went. And these Russians, very few of them spoke English. I can remember 2, maybe 3 spoke a little bit of English. They put us all up in their homes, very modest homes, cooked for us. It's amazing how we could communicate with not knowing the other's language. It forced us to communicate on deeper and unknown levels. Really extraordinary. So they took us on tours of the Kremlin and all over Moscow and to Zagorsk, where this 12th century monastery is still flourishing, and many side trips. We were there for 5 or 6 days before we left to go to Buddha Party. Now, the night before, we were to leave to fly from Moscow to Bombay, where we were going to be overnight in Bombay at the Dharmashantra. 5 of the Russians still did not have their papers. Their visas hadn't been approved. One of them was a boy named Peter. He was, I think, 23 years old, and he was a football player for the national Russian team, and he was a kicker. And he was pursued from teams all over the world at that time. Russia was very reluctant to let him go. and there were 4 others. So here we are gathered at the Sai Center in Moscow the evening before our departure the next day. And so we're praying to Swami. Swami, we need a miracle. Please intervene here so these 5 devotees can join the rest of us to come to Puja Party. Well, unbeknownst to anyone there, one of the women devotees' husband was a general in the Russian army. And he came in right about this time in full uniform. So everybody's looking around, oh, what's happening here? The army is here. Well, his wife had invited him to come. Swami invited his wife to invite him. Once he was apprised of the problem, he stood up and he said in Russian to all the people, those of you who still do not have your visas approved, come to my office tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock and I will stamp them. Now, how's that for a Swami miracle? So all 23 people, of course, we all boarded the flight to Bombay. So it shows how Swami coordinates and executes these really divine plans. Because there was no outer sign that these 5 people were going to be able to go. But through the prayers and His grace, it happened. And so we get to Bombay. It's just as hot as it could be. The last part of June, it was probably the high 30s centigrade. And so anyway, we slept, we had breakfast, we boarded the plane the next day for Puja Party. I was one of the first people on the plane, and there was you could see the newspaper on the first class seats. Swami's pictures on the front page of the newspaper. And I get it, I look at it, and it said, assassination attempt foiled. This was the day following the evening of the assassination attempt on Swami's life in Puja Party. So, wow, did that ever send us all into unknown emotional spaces. So we get to Puja Party, and of course the Indian Army is everywhere in Puja Party, and the security things that we all walked through that were never there before were suddenly there, and armed guards. It was quite something. Now, most of the Russian people stayed for 2 weeks. I stayed for 3 months, along with several other of the Americans. We stayed longer. And 3 of the young men from St. Petersburg stayed. During that time, we had, I would say I had 4.5 interviews. I had 4.5 interviews.
I'm worried about that half.
Well, that half interview, he called everyone into the interview room in the regular interview room in the Mandir. The group sometimes was so large that we had interview inside the Mandir. Then when most of the Russians had gone and there were a few of us remaining, he had us into the interview room. So everyone goes in, and I'm sort of picking up, making sure that everyone's in, and I come to the door and Swami goes, go back. Now, there are, I don't know how many thousand devotees sitting out there watching all this. And so you can imagine what's going through my mind. Oh, what have I done, Swami? How have I displeased you? Has my karmic account run dry suddenly? So I go back and I sit down, and of course everybody's quizzing me. Well, what happened? What happened? Well, I don't know what happened. He just told me go back. So that was the half interview. But during the 4 that I was in, Swami, I had never seen him before so gracious, loving, patient, all these Russians. It was very obvious that he was so happy that they had come. And he showed this happiness in making beautiful rings for many of the ladies. Some of the diamonds bigger than I had ever seen before. And I remember to one woman, her name was Irina, and he looked at her and he took her hand and he put that ring on her finger and he looked into her eyes and he said, "Pure, very pure." And he made a lavalier and a locket for the son of one of the devotees who walked with a limp. And his grace, his kindness, his very obvious love was so apparent for all of the Russians. It was just such an honor and a blessing for me to be a part of this and to feel and observe it. So then I stayed along with several of the other Russians, and the Russian boys from St. Petersburg invited me to come from Moscow to St. Petersburg on my way home to spend a week in Petersburg so they could show me their beautiful city. Only San Franciscans love their city, I think, as much as the people from St. Petersburg. Passionate about their love for their city. So I went, and so for a week we toured. I saw everything that was available to be seen in 1993. Keep in mind that privatization had just started. It had only been in effect less than a year. The Berlin Wall had just come down 8 or 9 months before. So they were transitioning. It was a time called perestroika, where everything was sort of upside down. People were still hanging on to their old way of being, where they were taken care of and they didn't have to worry about all of this. And then their impression of democracy was coming in on the tails of that, which really was hardcore capitalism. Everybody had something to sell. Card tables put up on the sidewalks, and if a kid just had 6 cans of Coca-Cola, he had them all stacked up there, ready to sell. So they were gung-ho for many of them for a change. So I came back to America and to Santa Fe, and during my 3 months there, I had a very strong feeling in Darshan one morning that I didn't ever need to come back. It was so strong that I didn't have it in my mind or heart really to return for quite a few years, until about 2009 or 10, whichever it was, and now I've been going every year. But I got to the point where...
I'm so sorry.
Yes, please.
It's a full-spoken facade that has to do.
There you go.
So I got to 2 or 3 years before I went back for the first time, in many years, I started feeling a pull to go back. And I asked Swami, I said, "Well, do you really want me to come?" I wasn't getting clear answers, because I said, I thought you were letting me know that no need to come back, but I wanted to go back. And it got to the point where I was really insisting on going back. So I did, and I have ever since, every year. Now, so I went, I was in the choir, and I said during choir practice one day, because there were like 300 Russians in the choir. There were a total of like 900 of us. You know, Rod, you were there, in the international choir. So I had this thought, oh, it's been so many years since I've seen my Russian friends. Go to the translator and ask her to ask the Russian group if there's anybody from 1993. So she did. No one was there, but many hands went up. They knew people who were in the group. So I gave my telephone number and email address. And I didn't think much more about it. So a couple of months go by. I have moved into a really beautiful apartment up on Hanuman Hill, and for several weeks I was quite happy there until my upstairs neighbor decided to replace their marble floor. And the woman next door decided to bring in 2 dogs that were very undisciplined. So there's all this noise going on, and finally I just said one day, I said, Swami, I'm obviously no good at picking apartments. Choose for me, get me out of here, put me someplace where I'm going to enjoy being. Because I obviously didn't do a very good job on choosing this place. So I went out for the day to, those of you who know Puttaparthi probably know where Ananda Farm is. It's just on the edge of town. And I went out for some peace and quiet and some beauty and serenity in the afternoon. Now, I had made this plea to Swami, get me out of here, put me someplace, late in the morning. So here it is, 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and my mobile phone rings. And the person on the other end, speaking with a Russian accent, and asks me if I'm Jim Hague, and I said yes. This person said, well, I'm a friend of Alexander Seko in St. Petersburg. And of course I knew exactly who he was talking about. This was one of the 3 boys that hosted me in St. Petersburg. And this person is saying, he's in St. Petersburg, he understands that you're living in Puttaparthi, and he wants you to go and live in his house. So I'm remembering back 1993 when nobody had any money, and I thought, oh my goodness, I wonder what kind of a place he's living in. So before I say yes, I'll say I want to see it. So I told his friend, I said, well, when can I see it? So we made a date for the next day. And so I went to see it. Well, let me tell you, it's a Mediterranean-style villa in the Russian House compound, which, Howard, when you were there, I don't think that existed. But if you remember where the government hotel is, across from the old bus depot, south of Dr. Rao's, it's sort of in that neighborhood, across from there. And so I got to see this. It has gates, and it's beautiful colors, and it's got all these bedrooms, and it has a puja room, and it has a swimming pool on the roof. And I said, oh, boy, you want me to live here? So I get Sasha's telephone number from the friend, and I call Sasha. So we have this sort of tearful reunion over the telephone, long distance. And he says, oh yes, I have this beautiful house, and I'm never there, and people want to rent it, and I don't want to rent it to anybody, but I want you to go and live there. He says, this is your house. You go and live there. So, Swami's grace. This was an answer to a prayer that I had made just hours before. But I was really, you can imagine what all this pounding over your head. I put up with it now for several days, from like 7 in the morning until time to go to Bhajan's in the after, or to Darshan in the afternoon. Swami was still with us then, and in his body. So all day long this was going on, and at night the dogs from next door were going off. And so I was really appealing for his help, and I got it. So that's a part of my Russian experience. And Sasha and I, after many years, got reunited and reacquainted, and he has a family now that he didn't have before. And he said to me back in 1993, he said, Jim, I am so impressed with Ayurvedic medicine. This is the answer to everything, and we don't have anything like this in Russia. And he said, I'm going to bring Ayurvedic medicine to Russia. I said, great, we all have a vision. I was much younger then, and we were all much younger, and I thought, good, go for it. Well, he did, and we were out of touch for years. And so after I'm living in the house, I'm there for 2 or 3 months, and Sasha gets on a plane and he comes down and we have this reunion, and he's telling me all about his life. Well, he'd been coming to Puttaparthi every year in the years that I wasn't going, and Swami had given him a lot of grace. And long story short, over that period of years, Sasha had made a partnership with a wholesale manufacturing company, and as I remember Sasha telling me, he had 1,600 distributors of the product all through Russia and clinics in 5 major Russian cities. So he had become very successful bringing Ayurvedic medicine to Russia. Now Sasha's an engineer by trade, so this was a side passion. He's a scientist, he's an inventor. Swami has given him an incredible amount of interviews and grace, enabling him to do all of these things. And another thing that he's done is creating the first portable X-ray machine that is both analog and digital, operates on a battery pack that can be taken into remote areas where there is no electricity. Doctors Without Borders and other hospitals with mobile units now have these that he makes available at a very low cost for these organizations. So that's another of Swami's miracles. And so for years, we didn't have email or cell phones, so we really only stayed in touch occasionally by a letter. So that's a little bit about that. About the Russian experience. Now let's see, Swami, what else would you like me to talk about here? Well, I can talk about how I first consciously came to Swami. Before I do that, does anybody have any questions about what we've just talked about?
When you went to Russia for the first time, were you introducing Swami to the Russians and sharing your Baba experiences when Goldstein had asked a group of people to go to Russia and then take them to Puja Party?
You know that I don't remember what we all talked about. We probably did. We talked before the Moscow group, which was quite a large group, and through a translator. I don't remember what we said, but probably. All I ever talk about is my experiences and the difference that Swami has made in my life. So I probably did.
But you were sent to escort them from Russia to Puja Party?
Yes.
I see, okay. I got it.
Dr. Goldstein wanted them to be in company that was experienced with how things work in India. He didn't want them to just arrive on their own unescorted. So we helped to pave the way, to make the way a little easier. There were a couple of the ladies the Western ladies who really championed the women devotees from Russia. And I took pretty much that same role for the men, of which there were fewer. There were more women than men. But we made sure that they had their saris and their whites for darshan, that they had their toiletries, that they had everything that they needed, and helped to integrate them into life in the ashram. We were all staying inside the ashram, most of us in sheds, except for families that were given family accommodations. So, yeah. But I always like talking about and sharing my first conscious experience. My first conscious experience with Swami was a Phyllis Crystal workshop that I attended at the old center on Ivy Street that Lila was facilitating, and I know many of you fondly know and remember Lila. This was my first actual experience, because I was cutting the ties to my stepmother, with whom I was having some really major problems. I was very, very angry at my stepmother for changing some family agreements that directly affected me. So the flyer that I saw said, "Cut the ties of negative attachment and dependency to another person and be free of it." And I thought, okay, I've done a lot of work on this subject, we'll do this one. and my mind is telling me, oh, well, you know, after it'll be like all the rest. After 3 days, you'll be back to square one with the issue. Well, instead of that happening, the work just intensified. And I started feeling a type of love and affection for my stepmother that I had never felt before. So 2 weeks went by. Every day I could see a different aspect of myself responding in a new and different way to my thoughts of my stepmother. And I thought, this is so powerful. I want to go to India and meet Sai Baba, because Lila said that Swami had given all of these processes and visualizations to Phyllis, and revealed that to Phyllis in her first interview in the 1970s. So I thought, if he's that powerful to work inside another person, and this work is so effective to change my mind about my stepmother, and there was more involved than just that. There was a lot of money involved too, that I was letting go, that I had to let go of. And I said, okay, I'll know that this process works if I'm no longer attached to the money. I was no longer attached to the money, and it was considerable. So I had to go and meet Sai Baba. But before I was going to go to India, my birthday was coming up. And I decided that I wanted to spend my birthday in northern New Mexico, in the Indian country. Because years before I had been through there and spent some time and loved it. I thought it was such a beautiful place, and I wanted to go there for my birthday, but that's over the 4th of July weekend. So I had bought my plane ticket, and I was trying to rent a car, and as we all know, you can't rent a car without a credit card. And I had gone through some pretty hard financial times, so I didn't have a credit card. So I'm looking at this photograph of Swami in the old center during the 15-minute meditation. I'm looking at that and I said, okay, Swami, what am I going to do about a vehicle once I get to Albuquerque? In a voice just as clear as yours or mine, but not Swami's voice and not my voice, but it was a voice I could clearly understand and was loud. He said, call the Sai Center in Albuquerque and the person that answers the telephone will assist you. Those are the actual words. Okay, so after meditation and arati and all of that, and we're getting ready to have food, I turned to Carol Goodpasture and I said, Carol, is there a center in Albuquerque? And she said, well, Jim, I don't know, but go upstairs, there's a directory of centers by the telephone. I went up, sure enough, there was, and I wrote the number down. So the next day, I called it was 2 or 3 days later. I was still trying to do it my way. I was still calling every rental car company in the yellow pages. Nobody would rent me a car for cash. Well, so finally I broke down and I called. Some of you may know Donnie McDowell. His parents are longtime devotees in Albuquerque. He answered the phone because the Sai Center was in his house at the time. And I told him my difficulty, and he said, Jim, call me tomorrow at this time, and I'll tell you what I have for you. He didn't say if or maybe. He said, I'll tell you what I have for you. So I thought, okay, Saira. I called the next day, and Donnie said, Jim, we have a devotee who's in the hospital, and he has a Dodge van that he is willing to rent to you cheaper than you could rent any rental car for in Albuquerque. So I'm there for 2 weeks. So Donnie said, what's your flight number? My wife Linda will pick you up at the airport and take you to the hospital, and you can meet Michael and give him the money, and then she'll take you on to where the van is. All of that happened. And not only did she take me to where the van was, it was at the home of another devotee, whose name is Linda Silk, and she's still with us. And she had washed the van, She'd outfitted it with Michael's ashram cot and guidebooks to the Indian Territory. There was nothing that I didn't have. And then Linda said, "Oh, by the way, Jim, we have 2 devotees in Santa Fe that are looking for a house sitter for over the 4th of July weekend. They have a cat and they're going to her parents in Boulder for the holiday. Would you be interested in living in a very nice place for a few days and taking care of the cat?" This is Patricia Gary. She was married to Chris at the time. And it was their house. So, I mean, more blessings coming. So I did that, and then they come back from Colorado, and I go on up near Ojo Caliente, between Taos and Santa Fe, where I wanted to be. So I'm doing my trip there, hiking and exploring and investigating all of that territory, and I'm feeling I'd really like to live here. The feeling was coming so strongly. But on the 4th of July, I looked at my finances and I thought, I need some cash. So I looked at the photograph on the dashboard of Michael's van, and I'm driving to Taos that day. And I said to Swami, Swami, I'm running low on cash. Where can I go and cash a check for $50? Now, this is 1989, $50 went a longer way then. So, here again, the voice speaks. Remember that gallery where you bought that drawing several years ago? Go there and they'll cash your check. So my mind immediately gets into it. Oh, they're not going to be open on the 4th of July. And, why would they remember me and cash my check? Well, anyway, I drive up. The door is open. It's 9:30 in the morning. And I walked in, and I recognized the woman sitting at the desk who helped me several years before. She remembered me. We had this little reunion, and I said, Virginia, I'm a little embarrassed to ask you, but I'm traveling and I'm running a little bit low on cash. Would you be able to cash a check for $50 or would you be able to cash a small check for me, is what I said. And she said, well, I've just opened, and I'll look in my cash box and see what I can do. The drawing that I had bought several years before was quite expensive, so she, I think, knew that I was good for it. She said, well, I've just opened, but I can let you have $50. So Swami is letting me know that he is all and everywhere present. There's not a thought that I think or a feeling I don't have that he's not aware of. So
he's an orange ATM machine.
He is. And so that set me just fine. And during that trip, I had been having breakfast at this little bed and breakfast called the Inn at Ojo, just up the road from the mineral springs. And I'm thinking, gosh, I really want to live around here. And I'd been living here in San Francisco. I thought, well, I want to live here. Why don't you just make it happen? See how you can do this. So I was saying to the owners of the inn, their names were Rob and Casey, and I said, I'm a massage therapist, and I would like to come and live here and work for a while. So they said, well, you can live right here. We'll give you a room, and we'll book your appointments, and we'll take a commission, and but you don't really have to do anything. Because down the road, I'd gone to the mineral springs, and I looked at that and I thought, I don't really want to work here. It wasn't an environment I wanted to be in. That's since changed. They've remodeled now, and it's quite a nice place. But then it was not. So then I'm saying to Swami, I looked at Swami's picture in Michael's van, and I said, well, how am I gonna do this? And the voice spoke again, and it said, you'll sublet your apartment in San Francisco. Oh, wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. Before any of that happened, I said, Swami, I want to come and see you. I want to come to India. This is the time, I want to come this year. How is that going to happen? Because I don't have any money. I don't have any money to come. So, he says, not his voice, not mine, but the voice said, "You'll sublet your apartment for $300 a month more than you're paying. Your friend Gary will let you live in his apartment for the 3 months before you go to India, because at this point it's July." And so I said, okay, if my landlady agrees to this, then I'll know that this is the correct information. Well, my landlady is this little old Italian up on Telegraph Hill in North Beach, and she's really cool. And so I called her, and I said, "Marion, I would like to live here for a while, and would you let me sublet my apartment until I know for sure that this is where I want to be?" And she, without batting an eyelash, said, "Honey, it's your apartment. You do whatever you want to with it." And just don't, she would always say, "Don't cause me any problems." I said, "I don't want any problems." So I thought, okay, this is great. So I get back to San Francisco. All this starts falling together. I get my apartment sublet, and Gary says, "Yes, I can come and live in his guest room."
No problem.
No problem. No problems. Right. Thank you.
The favorite term in India is no problem.
Right.
I finally figured out what it meant. It's
What's
not
it
a
mean?
problem for them.
Anyway, it was a gift. It was no problem at all. So then I thought, well, where am I going to see clients? Because I didn't want to ask Gary if I could see him at his place, because he's busy all day long with clients. So I said, I know what it was. Yes, I said to my friend Dorothy, who had an office on Union Street, what my problem was, and she said, "Well, I have a room in my office I'm not using. You can see your clients there, and you can have it for free. No rent." I thought, oh, Sai Ram, this is just too wonderful. Every need that I have, as soon as I have a perceived need, very soon on the heels of that need is the solution. Well, long story short, I bought my ticket, which I think was about $1,200 round trip in those days, from San Francisco. I went to India with $1,000 because I had the first and last month's rent, plus money that I had made doing my body work. I was set, and I stayed for 3 months that time. There you could live on $300 a month in India and not scrimp too much. So, and then I came back after that trip, and I had all this money in the bank from my tenant. So I used that money to then move to New Mexico. So Swami is teaching me how to trust. I'm still learning the lesson. I didn't get it full on the first time by any means. I'm still learning it. But he was teaching me that I could ask and trust in his wisdom. Here a few years ago, when he instructed me to sell my house on Kauai, that was very clear. And I said, "Well, Swami, how will I know when, this is all interview, not interview, how will I know when to put it on the market, because this is a terrible time to sell property?" And he said, "Your tenant will give you notice, and then you put it on the market." All right, my tenant gave me notice in September. This was in 2010, and my tenant gave me notice in September. And the day after my house was listed, a realtor called my lister, and I knew both realtors. I said, "Did you list Jim's house yesterday?" He said, "Yes." I said, "I have a client that I've shown many properties to. Nothing has clicked. I think he might like Jim's house. Can I see it tomorrow?" So, long story short, The client was from Seattle. He photographed the house on his iPhone, sent it to his wife, emailed it to his wife. On Friday, the wife and daughter got on a plane, and we were under contract on Saturday. And in Hawaii at that, and I came down a bit from what I was asking, and they came up from what they had been willing to pay for anything else they had seen. So this was at a time, and so I asked my realtor, I said, Terry, what's the average length of time a house is on the market right now? And he said, 9 months. So it was listed on a Monday evening, shown on Tuesday morning, where the family saw it again on Friday, and we wrote a contract on Saturday. And Swami told me very clearly, he said, do not be on the property when your house is being shown. Make sure that you are not there. So I wasn't. I never met the new buyer. So, Sai Ram. So.
Did Swami give you a rabbit's foot in one of those interviews?
Well, you know, lad. He did, but it's not on the material. On my first visit to Swami in winter of 1989, most of our group had left. This was on January the 17th, we finally got an interview. In those days, I got first line fairly often. And whenever I get first line, I say, interview Swami, interview. And he'd just look all around at everybody but me. But he'd be standing right in front of me, so at least I got Namaskar pretty often. But I was, Swami, interview. And so one day, on January 17th of that year, I said, interview Swami, interview. And he looked down at me so sweetly, and he said, how many? I said, 7, Swami, 7. Go. So I sat there, and the guy next to me went, go. So I jump up, and I just go like that to the ladies, and here we run off to the interview room. But what happened in there when you asked me about a rabbit's foot? Carol had told me, and she was in the same interview. She said, Jim, if we ever do get an interview, make sure you get your first in there and sit right at the end of his chair, right at his right foot. So I did. So Swami is saying to me, he's saying, what is your religion? And I said, Christian, Swami. And he looks and he goes, takes his right hand and he goes like this. Out comes this white metal ring. And he puts it like this in my face. And in my mind I said, I don't want a ring with a gold cross on it. I want Swami. Me thinking that I meant I want the gold image of Sai Baba on the ring. And so Swami takes the ring back and he says, I know. You don't want a ring with a gold cross on it. You want Swami. So he goes, and he puts it right back in my face, and it's like, I melt. It's like, oh boy, now I know what they're all talking about. So he hands the ring to one of the ladies, and they go to put it on their finger, and he says, no, look and pass. So for the next hour, I attached and detached from that ring 150 times. And I'm just sitting there looking at him like this, for that whole time. And so the ring comes back around. It comes back around the back of me. And Swami says, and then Swami puts his hand out and the man gives him the ring. It's the right hand. The man gives him the ring. Swami's looking at me so sweetly. Just so sweetly, like a mother, just so sweetly loving, looking at her child. And he picks up the hand of the man to my left, and he doesn't take his eyes away from my gaze, and he slips that ring on his finger, and all the time he is looking at me. And that was that. But I have to tell you, the man who was on my left was from Holland, and I didn't know him, but he was sleeping in the bunk on the left of me in the shed. And the man sitting on my right was from Italy, and he was sleeping on my right in the shed. Swami had called those other two people, in addition to our group and a couple of Indian families, into the interview room. So, figure that one out. So, but it took me a long time to realize that what Swami had given me, I said, I want Swami. I don't want a ring with a gold cross on it. I want Swami. I got him here. Because for the whole time that I was in northern New Mexico, I was living in the country. I had no car. I had very little money. I had a comfortable place to stay, but I had no fear. I had no fear about the future, and at that time I was 40-something years old. I had just been downsized from the company that I'd worked for many years. It was before downsizing was a familiar term. And so I was recreating my life all over again. But I had no fear. And it was in meditation one morning, in Ojo Caliente, that I had the feeling, it wasn't a voice, it was just a feeling, you've been here now for several months, and you've had no fear about anything. I go off hiking with just running shoes and no pants out on the mesa. Easily get a snake bite out there. I had no fear of anything. And no concerns. Knowing that everything was as it was supposed to be and the future would be the same. That's changed. You know, I now have plenty of fears and concerns, but for that period of time I did not. So I got Swami inside, and I think Swami probably was saying to himself, well, he'd probably lose the ring anyway or give it away, because it was my tendency to, if somebody said they liked something, I would give it to them. And whatever, he had his reasons. But, and then leaving the interview room that day, after the interview, he had us all get up and sort of move out into this area just outside the interview room, but still under the overhead of the mandir. And we're sitting there, and Swami comes up with this big red shopping bag full of vibhuti packages, and he just gives everybody a handful. And then he comes to me, and I have my hands out like this, and I'm looking up, and he gives me 2 handfuls. It's running over, and the people on either side of me are picking it up and putting it back into my hands. So I have no idea what all that was about, but I ended up giving most of that vibhuti away when I got back to this country to people that were sick or for whatever reason I was guided to do, so I gave most of it away anyway. But that was the rabbit's foot. So I've still got it, so to speak. He works in much subtler ways. And in order for us to really hear his guidance, we have to get quiet in order to hear it. So, but in those years, he knew that my mind chatter was pretty loud. So he knew that in order to get my attention, he had to talk over that.
But at least your antenna was dust-free and you could hear.
I could hear so clear. And that first time it happened to me during the meditation, the old center, when I was looking at this photograph, I had no sooner asked the question than I got the answer. There was maybe a 2-second pause, and it was loud. The room was quiet. It was during meditation. So, and you know, other times I'll ask him for guidance on things, and I get nothing, and I just have to sort of figure it out and remember to dedicate that to him. It's like, I don't know, Swami, it's like pinning the tail on the donkey in the dark. I don't know what I'm doing here, but it's like some action has to be taken, and I'm going to take it. And you figure it out, you know?
Yeah.
So that's how it is for the most part these days. But the last time the voice was that loud is when he told me to sell my property on Kauai. And I did. And that nobody could believe it. Least of all my realtor, who's one of the top producing realtors on my island. And he sold me the house 9 years before. He could not believe how it happened. He said, I've never seen anything like this before. And just a little aside with that, he told me when the family came on the Friday from Seattle to look at the house, the wife was in a hula halau in Seattle. A halau is a group of students who have a hula teacher. And their daughter is psychic. She's 14 years old. The daughter walked into the house before the parents, and according to my realtor, the girl said, Mom, Dad, this is our home. And Terry said, my realtor, said the mother told him later that wherever they go, the girl goes first into the hotel room, into wherever they go, to say this is okay. Now the husband is a NASCAR race driver, so this is not an overly cautious family necessarily, but they know and understand and respect their daughter's ability. So the daughter goes in and says, Mom, Dad, this is our home. They have a tour through the house, and Terry said without any music or anything else, the mother starts doing a hula in the living room. Now, I wasn't there. Tommy said, you're not supposed to be there. So that's just another little thought about that came up. So,
I mean, Swami works for all these people. Not just you.
So it's pretty powerful stuff, and I say to myself, well, don't you think you've had enough experiences by this time to really get it, to really understand it, and you're still trying to figure it out and bang your head against the wall and all of that? But that's the way it is. I remember Swami said, it's the wildest horses that are my favorite because they make the best devotees. And when I heard him say that, I thought, well, I think you might be speaking to me here because I've got a lot of resistance and I'm really invested in doing things my own way, much less so now. But I remember when I heard that quotation of his, I thought, I might be speaking to people like me. I remember now, it was Al Drucker that told me that. And we were both sort of joking that he was, because he said he's talking to me too. So I thought, well, if I can turn out to be one of those devotees, thank you, whatever it takes. So, well, I think you've probably heard enough of my talking, at least for a while. Does anybody have anything to ask or anything to say about your own experiences? Anybody have anything to share about their own experiences with Swami? Just thought of something. Anybody?
Well, Jim,
Yes,
I just always so appreciate your devotion to Baba. I'm around you.